Well, so good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here this morning. I think we've had amazing sessions from the morning, of course, the unveiling of FutureForge. And now Manu has set the stage for this conversation by really inspiring all of us of what's possible. So we'll dive into this discussion, right, for about building AI for India. Of course, within the deep tech ecosystem, AI is the topic that is most discussed and most relevant with the changes that are happening and happening so fast. But like Manu brought out minutes ago, it is super relevant for us to have the conversation of what does this mean for our ecosystem and our country here, and what are challenges, opportunities ahead, right? So really excited to host this with two very eminent speakers who've been working in research and building products on the ground, and for scale as well. So we'll start off with, hey, thank you so much, Tanuj, as well as Dr. Kalika, right? A quick round of introductions, and just talk about yourselves in terms of what work you have done, and how therefore you are starting to see AI as well from your perspective. You could start with that, and then we'll dive into specifics.
Kalika?
Thank you, Tanuj. I'm Kalika, that's Kalika, and I'm a researcher. I've been with Microsoft Research Labs India for 17 and a half years, and I've mainly been working in NLP and speech. A lot of it was for Indian languages at one point, and then I started working with very low resource language communities. And when I started working with very low resource language communities, I started getting interested in actual deployment of technology that helps them, which is not just about language, but lots of other issues and lots of other access related things. So that's what I try to do now.
Thank you. And my name is Tanuj Bhojwani. For the last 7 odd years, I've basically been building what we call DPIs, so the India stack. Started with the UPI project. I was part of that team. Been working with people at Ekstep Foundation. If you know it, is Nandan Nilekani and Rohini Nilekani's education NGO. And basically the team that built Aadhaar went on to do this, UPI, other such things. And since about June this year, I've been tasked with heading People Plus AI. Two things we do. One is we believe that there is a shiny new toy in town, right? And as technologists, we all very get excited. But to bring that conversation back to the people, to put them at the center of the conversation and say, what does our country need? What can we do? And in this, to answer that question, if there are any other infrastructure, public goods that need to be built, People Plus AI hopes to build that, including, we started with funding AI for Bharat, which is basically putting together this corpus of data, but we're looking for more such ideas where we can build tools that the whole country benefits from this new AI revolution.
Thank you so much. Right, I represent Special Invest, an early stage venture fund. We invest in deep technology ideas, and therefore at the heart is AI. So that's hopefully the context and vantage point that I'll bring in. We'll dive right into it, sort of thinking about discussing in the India context, overlaying AI, stack it up to say, what do we think about models that are specific for India? Is there an opportunity? Do we have to build them, or can we, ride on what global models are available? One is India specific, probably languages as well, like you've already mentioned in your work of research. The other part is domain specific models, right? Depending on use case, depending on applications, etc., right? And we have so many areas to solve for, so that is one layer. And obviously, when we talk about AI, therefore, the data that goes into it, which are challenges, that talk a little bit about what Tanuj has been mentioning in terms of the India stack, and can that be leveraged to further enhance the capabilities and the impact of AI, correct? And I think what we should, across all of this, not forget is the impact on people, talent, through AI in different forms, right? And of course, would love for you to take the conversation wherever. So start with maybe models, both of your perspectives on, what is the opportunity and what is the need to build India-specific models, and in what capacity?
I'll
please,
let
Kalika.
Tanuj go
Okay,
first.
Tanuj, please.
So I think this is a raging debate, right? Because sort of as news channels love to do is that you find a point of controversy and of other, most answers are boring. They're it depends, right? But when somebody comes and asks, can we do this and under so many $1 million in this country? And somebody says no, which is a fair answer. Um, uh, People get riled up. So, if you're going to ask this question, should we have an India model? Can we have an India model? I think first thing you should ask is what is an India model, right? Is it made in India simply? Is that the thing? It was made in the geographical boundary of this country. For that, you have to ensure a lot of things that you actually have those kind of GPUs here because even that training is not going to happen here. Even if you had say an Indian team comprised of Indians doing it. Here, is that enough to call it an Indian model? Or is it trained on Indian data? Right? And if so, how much Indian data do we have? Do we have it at the scale at which these large language models that you're trying to compete with can create? Do we even have those many tokens in the first place? And then finally, is it being made for Indians, right? Like in the context and in what they need? And are you building a model to serve them, right? I think a lot of the chest beating sort of made in India kind of stuff is irrelevant. I see no point. I see that, sure, we didn't make it to that race, but we've been second or third or last to many races and we've still come out ahead, right? So I don't think that should like deter us or make us feel underconfident. The sort of telecom leapfrog, UPI, right? We're the world's global leader in digital mobile payments, retail payments. We've managed to do this before. So let's instead take stock of where we are, what's our strength, what we need, and then decide what our Indian model is. Having said that, and this is where I want to pass the mic to Kalika because her work has been in essentially identifying in those areas where existing models don't do justice to our language, our culture, our preferences, right? And those are things that we will need. There are languages that we shouldn't ignore just because they are not friendly to AI, right? So in those areas, I think we do need work and we need to be doing something. And the way to get there may first be sort of, cracking a lot of research like Kalika does, collecting a lot of data in those languages that all of us need to do that Karya helps to, AI for Bharat is doing. And those are concrete steps you can take to eventually get to a model, right? An India model that we all should be doing and doing now. But more on this problem, I want to pass to Kalika.
Yeah, sure. So I agree, it depends. What do you want the model for? If you want the model to understand most of the languages that people here speak other than English, yes, we need an India-specific model. If you want a model that understands cultural preferences, context, and things that are important to us in various parts of this country, because we also have a lot of diversity within the country, then yes, we need an India model. But what shape and what size this is going to take is still up for debate. I was in a summit with, which was organized by Eric Schmidt, and when Eric Schmidt was giving his lecture, his talk, keynote, at the end he said, and yes, India should have its own contextual models. And I think that's the whole thing, own contextual models. Not like in a race, because what are we in a race for, right? We don't have to prove anything to anyone. Do we want to build an open AI GPT model just because it is there? Maybe some of us do, but is it going to be useful? I really don't know. And I'll give you the one very specific example. People who work with AI models, the current ones, always come back feeling that these models are, GPT is a Western entity, like the culture is Western. And then people come and say, what do you even mean by it's not Indian culture? Just try asking GPT something as simple as, what should I, a woman of a certain age, wear for my friend's son's wedding? And just see what response it gives you. I would never be able to wear that to any wedding in India, right? So those are the kind of things that knowledge bases and data specific things and context specific, culture specific things that we have to understand and build into the models.
No, absolutely, makes a lot of sense. going to the data aspect, which has come up now a few times, is what is the readiness of our data in our country, in what context again, right? Because we want to build India contextual models, or we should ideally at some point in time. Then what data do we have? Are we ready with the quantity of the data, the quality of the data, the preparation of the data, right? And again, how do we think about building towards that step, which is sort of a prerequisite to build whatever applications on top via AI. So what is your view? And of course, you built a bunch of been critical to building so many India stack products where there is unique data that is being captured as well.
So here is where I feel like maybe a little bit, let's take a step back and look at the paradigm of what we are seeing now. Is that machine learning has been happening for a while.
Yeah.
You had supervised machine learning, and you said, okay, for companies, if you have a business problem, you have a labeled set of data, if you can label it yourself, or you have it from business context saying that this is good, this is bad, you can eventually train a model to get more, sort of classify into more the examples of good versus bad. We have a new paradigm of generative AI right now, where it seems like it is able to do a lot of the old machine learning tasks by itself. You don't really need to sit and train an explicit model. And also it can sort of generate new things that are at a completely different level of paradigm. Now, what do you think all of this will unlock? Is that, what I see is that there's many parts, not, so far I haven't seen a whole product, even an Airbnb or whatever, to that level of finesse, everything you need to do. I'm thinking about Airbnb because I don't know if you all saw the OpenAI demo last night, where they did the travel thing. So, you can't get to a 100% finished business application, like actually book a hotel, actually get stuff done or whatever, just about yet, right?
Yeah.
So you're probably going to have what I call AI in the flow, right? So there is something that you're already doing as a workflow, as a business in a domain, and then there are various parts of it that basically, in something like a large language model or a generative image model, right, can come replace, right, parts of that flow. So you still need humans to sort of think through the flow, orchestrate it, do that. Now, in this, there are only specific pieces, hopefully, that require that Indian context and that Indian data. Let's say NPCI tried to do this voice chatbot, which they're letting you pay anybody by doing voice, right? So at this point of time, what that model needs to be able to do very well is to recognize in which language you're speaking, recognize mixed coding, that we speak in Hindi, English all the time. We will say, State Bank ko itne paise bhej do, right? Like you will say something like that. There are 2 words of English and the rest in Hindi. Being able to sort of identify those entities. So there'll be very specific tasks that we end up doing. Instead of boiling the ocean and saying we need Indian data, Indian data, Indian data, if we can come back down to what is the use case in that context, what is the kind of things we need, we can probably get to 80%, 90% there today with in reasonable use cases that you see. And then figure out how best to get that remaining 20%. And I think this is across the board where we are, except for obviously very low resource languages.
Yeah, and there is a lot of work being done in creating data sets, very good data sets across the board, right? Like AI for Bharat, Karya, academic institutions, even commercial entities are getting together to make the data sets that are required. But a general thing for the first 22 languages, like the official 22 languages, might happen sooner than we expect. But for the rest of the languages, I think it's still a long way to go right now. And we should kind of think about how much of our population actually does not speak those 22 languages and do the math there.
No, but that's very heartening to hear that even we might get to the 22 languages sooner than the others, right? Because that itself is a big leap, going from AI just being for sort of the elite in the room, and I think Manu also referred to this, English speaking, right, tech first, tech savvy. So that is, so with that context, can we jump onto the fact saying which applications in your eyes that are that can be really impactful for India, for Bharat, correct? That can take it to really the masses. Which areas, sectors, right? Do we say user first, consumer first, and then maybe there's also the government side and the, sovereignty of this country side, situation. Let's talk about where you think big impact is possible.
So I can go on about this. I want to ask Kalika if she wants to take this
So,
first.
so there is obviously the public-facing side, that we really need to. We can really see impact very fast there, right? It's for everyone to see. So, healthcare, education, you know, financial services, government services, etc., etc. So those are very consumer facing, and of course, a lot of people are working on that. But there are two things that I would like to kind of bring out, which we don't normally talk about, and it's really important for India as a country to, sovereignty kind of a thing, that we need to build and protect in some sense. One is defense and AI. There's a lot of work happening in defense and AI. It's critical, it's nation critical, and that's where, we need to, as the government, as Indians, we need to invest in that just to keep up with our capabilities in that area, right? Because the thing that I've been hearing in this area is that now software is much more important than actual hardware in terms of weapons. And, right now there is capability in this field where, from behind the enemy, like your own lines, you can go across enemy line, choose exactly which building you want to kind of destroy and send a drone to do it, right? So that's a very, very important area, I think. And the second thing that should be worrying all of us is the climate. So that's also a big area where I think the government needs to, there are, other kind of investments in this area, but the government needs to step in and invest and at least regulate, because climate, we don't think, but climate is again like medical research, right? Because you can't just go out and say, okay, today I will have this experiment out there and we will see whether the trees will exist or they will go away, right? It's the same kind of regulation is required even in the climate space. And maybe Arjun, you have experience in this, so you might be able to tell us better.
No, I wouldn't say experience, but yeah, I think from a investment thesis perspective, right, we're DeepTech first, and we ended up noticing that a lot of hardware engineering deep tech solutions were actually solving climate problems, right? Be it battery technology, EVs, etc., or hydrogen, or little bit of space tech for Earth observation to really solve for agricultural problems or greenhouse gas emissions, alternative proteins and materials. There are a lot of areas, and in all of these, by the way, there are very strong interventions of AI and software and data, right, to either accelerate the development of these or to do simulations, because these can be very expensive experiments. So absolutely 100% resonate with your thought that on the climate side, as well as your original point on defense and intelligence, right, we need to sort of build solutions, and AI will be a very strong enabler there. Big opportunity. We are excited as investors, and I think research is happening.
I think I want to put out a few more ideas, right? I think while these are not 100%, right, it's frankly, I mean, if everything you do right now with AI and what you're saying, you should treat as a little bit of, okay, this is an imagination, right? This is web in the early or whatever, late 90s, etc. The things that we are seeing as constructs that are very helpful is that there are many industries where, especially in India, where you've had essentially an army of people trying to sell, right? And what that has done, whether it is insurance, it's even loans in some cases, what happened with the microfinance industry in the late 2000s, is because you have a set of agents whose agents as in human agents, whose set of incentives are very different from what actually works out for the customers and the people. Then all sorts of bad problems like information asymmetry, etc., come in. We do think that there is a chance where you can create sort of, even if they can't act today, but information-wise, they can be fiduciary to the consumers, and you can be assured of this, right? Like that there is an AI agent really trying to solve a complex problem and help you make a decision, and it is, responsible towards you, not towards the company making it. we see that as a paradigm. The second thing we see is that, again, there's a lot of, because of the lack of literacy or education or just confidence in being able to deal with formal systems, you always have these agents and middlemen, from everything to even getting a government benefit and filling a form. So I think the one use case that got really popular was the Jugalbandi thing, ended up on the Microsoft Satya Nadella keynote. When we double-clicked on that use case and we went down, we saw that while there are cases of people not knowing what scheme they're eligible for, which is what that bot was doing. The dropouts happen not at that stage, but then when you know what scheme you have to do, you have to actually put together documents, fill up a form, apply it to a government office. That step is hard. It's really
a lot
hard.
of friction.
A lot of friction,
Yeah.
and especially if you're illiterate, you don't know what you're doing. Every form is high stakes, right? Every thing you sign is high stakes. You don't know what you're signing away or signing onto. So being able to navigate that journey, for example, is we see possible today, because literally what we're trying one demo sort of in the advanced version. This is where we're saying, just click the documents that you have.
Yeah.
Right? We will see what all other problems you have, like Aadhaar name to PAN card name mismatch.
Yeah.
Right? The fact something that comes up after you apply and you get rejected. Right? We're saying we know all these like 15 ways in which these forms don't go through. You just click pictures of your documents. We will decipher from that, build like a small profile about who you are, what we know, what documents you have. Tell you what in stepwise, okay, these are the process changes you should apply for, name change here, date of birth change here, etc. These are the documents you are missing you should get, and then we will give you a filled form.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Now just go submit this form to a government office and get your benefits, or submit this form and go get a loan. Right? We'll fill that form up for you. So we're trying stuff like this because we do think that, the mental paradigm in my head is that earlier, you used to know binary to code, then assembly, then higher level languages, C, then came all the way to Python and for some reason JavaScript. But now it's reaching a stage where you can use English to tell computers what to do. This is extremely powerful. Right? And I specifically say English today because still the work that Kalika does comes in. And then when we get to Hindi and Bengali and Marathi and Sindhi, to tell computers what to do, that's a very different powerful paradigm, right? We don't need a lot of the software and SaaS world that we're seeing. Hopefully people will be able to just tell the computer what to do and it does it.
No, I think it's a great evolution, right? IT services, SaaS, and even SaaS, right? It's abstraction of complexity and therefore removal of friction. That's a great point. Sorry, Kalika, you wanted to add something.
So I would also like to answer an unasked question related to this. So we won't need programmers and software engineers anymore. I think we will, and we'll need loads of them and really good ones. Because if this goes bad, you have to really be a very good programmer to understand where it's gone bad. So I don't think we're going to lose programmers anytime soon.
No, great point on then the impact on the talent that we need to build as a country, right? Again, we might have to leapfrog certain education or training levels in the software world with this new paradigm. What are your thoughts on that impact, both in terms of quantity as well as quality that we need going forward?
So I have another pet theory that we really like to work on. We call it plus AI talent. It's
plus AI talent.
Plus AI talent. So we say that a simplest example I have is that all the way till about 2 years ago, if like even in the 1500s, if you wanted to be an artist, you need to have an imagination, fine motor skills, right? You could do it now, let's say on a Wacom tablet with Photoshop, so you have copy, paste, repeat, but you still needed fine motor skills, or if with a mouse or whatever, and imagination, maybe some understanding of software now. In the last year, like right now, if you use DALL-E 3, you can basically describe and get to this. So that fine motor skill requirement just went away only now, right? So a very different set of people can become artists, and maybe because they don't have to go through the unlearn journey, right? They can probably even be better, different quality of artists.
Probably true in music as well in different forms, right? As long as you have the sense of music, but yeah.
But you can't play an instrument, right? But you can now, you couldn't edit a movie, but now you have this thing. So what we are seeing is a lot of professions, the core skills required, that definition is going to change, right? And therefore, India, which has all the demographic advantages in the world, we are young, we are digitally connected, we have all of this India stack stuff, everybody has a smartphone, data is very cheap. We are very well poised as AI takes time to go from whatever it's doing, 60, 70, 80%, pick a number, to 99%, in that journey, you're going to need people to make it work. So people will realize that an AI writes a legal document more or less 90% correct, you need 10% addition. Are you still going to hire a person out of the US, or are you going to hire a person out of India? Right? So I already know a bunch of AI startups like this in India. So my take is that the jobs here are going to increase in your context. Overall in the globe, I still think humans will find things to do. Like people were selling, like they call, right, JPGs in the crypto boom. So professions get created, right? Like that's not the problem. But I do think for India, it's a very good time. I want to sort of.
Yeah, I completely agree. I couldn't have said it better.
No, I think we're at the top of the line, 25 minutes. Maybe one last thing, both of you enough talked about cost of compute, cost of AI building, training, then delivering. Of course, there's been some announcements very recently as of yesterday. Cost is coming down very quickly. But again, from a cost angle, given that enough people on the stage since morning have said India doesn't have capital, right? Domestic capitals, founders, entrepreneurs, etc. Right? Is there any other thing as an ecosystem we can do, the government can do? Again, right, from a stack perspective, I know Tanuj, you have some very strong views there. So quickly.
Okay, very quickly. I think that, and we're hoping to launch this in December 5th in GTS, for those of you who will be there, Global Tech Summit, is that I do think that capital is the main requirement, right? You need to invest in compute. Now, the point is, will you invest in compute? Do you, if you, let's say I have a spare $100,000 lying around, am I going to buy a GPU and say, here it is, use it? Probably not, because you know that you can't compete with the big three of CSPs, cloud service providers. So, so how that we can do this is that, we can use the UPI playbook, where you had Visa, you had MasterCard, you had these large networks that existed and seemed, untouchable. But we did manage to touch them, right? So there is a similar idea where we can put together a bunch of decentralized compute. We may not beat them at every application. OpenAI will probably not come to this, but it does give us a base for our own startups or whatever to start shifting compute out of these locked-in providers into a more open paradigm. And that sort of kickstarts an investment cycle, right? And then...
And it is used as a public good for, mission critical, nation building and other.
Yeah, so what happens is that instead of silos, instead of the government buying a supercomputer and then provisioning it, if we instead had an open network of compute, right? So which acts, because there are, Moore's law has been acting, even if it's not through GPUs or whatever, the actual dollar cost of a compute is been coming down rapidly. They're getting smaller in size. You have Kubernetes, which means that sort of, everything is containerized, everything is, you can just run it on any compute, wherever you get it. Basically, what used to be like these large operations and data centers is what you think about Google Cloud, Microsoft, etc. For the most part, it's come down to somebody with 500 square foot space, one water connection, one electricity connection, one fiber connection can set it up and get going, right? So there's no reason why we can't increase compute capacity. We may not be able to do high-end compute GPU just yet, fair. But we can start this and this will grow, right? Like you have to have that belief that this is, cloud industry will go from about 500 billion to 1.5 trillion by the end of this decade, 2030. You have to believe that that 1 trillion pie is something that we want to have a share in.
Yeah.
Right? And if you have that belief, I think you can make it happen.
Awesome.
No, just two things there. So first thing is like when we kind of go down that path, which is a very practical and good path for a country like India, the things that you have to worry a little bit more about are security, privacy, all those kind of safety features in such a thing. So because you do not want a rogue, software or AI person sitting somewhere kind of, hacking into the thing and then the entire thing comes down. The second thing is that I agree. I don't think this compute is going to be a problem in a few years. Things are coming down really rapidly, and if we look historically as well, these things come down really rapidly. People are working on smaller and smaller models, distilling models. So, I think we will consider this a non-issue in a few years.
No, that's a very, very positive sign, and we'll wrap up on that. Time's up. Very positive sign. Headline for us, lots to build, right, for the country and for, for all of us to develop. So thank you so much for your candid thoughts, Tanuj and Kalika. Really appreciate it.